Today we're going to talk about multiplying binomials, or what's sometimes called FOIL, or foiling. And I'm going to walk you through the process of how to do it, and at the end of the notes I'll tell you why we sometimes call it FOIL. So let's start off by talking about what a binomial is. Now the prefix bi, bi, means two. So binomial means we're basically talking about two terms. So they might look something like this. You could have a nice simple one like x plus 5, or maybe a little bit more complicated one like 3x squared minus 8x to the fifth. But remember when we talked about terms, we said the fact that there's addition or subtraction involved, it's that plus or that minus in between that separates it into two terms. All right, so there's two ways to think about this problem. Number one is using the distributive property, which is what we just learned last section. Now you're gonna have to do it twice though. So what you do is you take one of your binomials. So remember, we're multiplying two binomials. There's two things with two terms each. You pick one of them, you take the first term of that one, and you distribute it to the other polynomial. Then you repeat. You take the second term of that one, and you distribute it to the second polynomial. Now, you'll end up with four terms. Sometimes you have common terms or like terms, and you want to combine those. So let's look at an example. Let's say we wanted to multiply 2x plus 5 times x squared minus 6x. And we are actually going to work this example out on the next slide, but right now what I want to do is just walk through the problem, talk about how we would solve the problem. So basically what I could do, let's say we're going to distribute the first binomial to the second one. Well, I would do it one piece at a time. I would start with the 2x and do a distributive property to the x squared minus 6x. Then you do the same thing with the 5. Take the 5 and distribute it to the x squared minus 6x. Then at the end you combine your like terms. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do this exact example right here. We're going to multiply this problem. So what I would do, I said the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the 2x and I'm going to distribute it to the second binomial. So I'm going to multiply it times x squared. That would be 5x times x squared. And I'm going to multiply it times the negative 6x. So I'm going to put plus 2x times negative 6x. Okay, now I'm going to put a plus in the middle, and then I'm going to distribute the 5. Now I'll put my arrows underneath just to make it a little easier to see. But when I distribute the 5, I do 5 times x squared and 5 times negative 6x. So I'll do plus and then 5 times negative 6x. So what you have is 4 separate problems where you're going to be multiplying terms, and all you do for each one of them, we have here, 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 and here. For each one of them, remember the rules we just talked about when we were doing first multiplying terms and then distributive property. So right here, remember we talked about with terms you have some hidden ones here. This is an x to the first power and this is a 1x squared. So when I multiply the constants, 5 times 1 is 5. X to the first times x squared, 1 plus 2 is 3, so I get x cubed. Okay. Now for my second one, I have the numbers, the constants. 2 times negative 6 would be negative 12. Remember, don't forget about your negatives in there. And then x to the first times x to the first, 1 plus 1 is 2, so I get x squared. Okay, so then we get to the red ones. 5 times x squared is just 5x squared. I'm just going to push those together. And for the last one, 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. And then that x, I'm just going to leave in the answer. I'm not combining it with any of it. So I did it in colors. In light blue is where I was distributing the 2x. In red, I was distributing the 5. Now what you want to do is look for common terms. So my first term is an x cubed. These two right here, these are common terms because they both have x squared in them. So I can add those together. So for my final answer, I'm going to leave the 5x cubed because I have nothing to combine that with. Now if I have negative 12x squared plus 5x squared, I can add those together. Negative 12 plus 5 is negative 7. So I'm going to end up with negative 7x squared. And then I'm going to leave the negative 30x because I have nothing to combine that with also. So that's my final answer there in purple. And all I did was the distributive property twice. So if you understood our last lesson on distributive property, this should be nice and easy for you because all you're doing is that exact lesson twice. The last thing I want to do for today, though, is talk about that word FOIL from the title. So you may have heard teachers just say, like, we're going to FOIL this. And what they mean is we're multiplying binomials. I say it sometimes, even in class. Well, the word FOIL actually is an acronym. Each letter stands for something. So the F stands for first. And that means the first thing you do is you multiply the first term of each binomial. Then the O stands for outside terms. That means if instead of thinking of it as two separate binomials, you think of it as 4 terms in a row, you're basically taking the first one and last one, the ones on the outside. I stands for inside, which is the exact opposite. So again, instead of thinking of it as 2 binomials, think of it as 4 terms going across. It's the second and third ones, the middle ones. And L stands for last. It's the last term of each binomial. So what I want to do real quickly is show you, we're going to work out the exact same example we just did. I'm going to do it by foiling, and then you'll see that it's actually the exact same thing. So let's say I want to do FOIL. So I'm going to do F stands for first, which means I'm going to multiply the first term of each one. That would be 2x times x squared, which would give you 2x cubed. Then, and I'll switch colors for each one to really make it stand out, the O means the outside terms. That means the first term and the last term. That would be 2x times negative 6x. And that would give you negative 12x squared. Okay, then the I stands for the inside terms, the middle ones. That's the 5 and the x squared. So I would do 5 times x squared, which is just 5x squared. And if these terms are looking familiar to you, you'll see in a minute it's the exact same work we just did. And last term, L. So L means the last term of each one. So that would be the 5 and the negative 6x, the last of each of the 2 binomials. So I would do 5 times negative 6x, and you would end up with negative 30x. And oops, this one above it was supposed to be 5x squared, not 5x. Now, all those terms look very familiar because it ends up being the exact same thing. Like when I distributed, the first thing I did was 2x times x squared. That's what I did for F. And then the second, I did 2x times negative 6x. That's what I did for outside. And then the third one, I did 5 times x squared. That's basically what became inside. And then the last one was 5 times negative 6x. So whether you're thinking of it as distributive property or thinking of it as FOIL, you're ending up with the same 4 terms here. And when you combine like terms, put them in order, put them in the right place, you'll get the same answer. You'll get 2x cubed minus 7x squared minus 30x again. So just so you're not confused, you may hear me say during class, oh, we're going to FOIL these things. You don't have to use FOIL. It's probably better to use distributive property. It's less of a memory trick and more like understanding the process. But either one will work because it's basically the same thing. So that's what we're doing today. We want to make sure you guys know how to multiply binomials. You can either do it using the distributive property or you can do it using FOIL because it's the exact same thing.